everybody. Let's get this party started. So today we're here to talk about E2 visas for Australians. My name is Angie Rupert, founder of Rupert Law Group. We handle exclusively E2 and E1 visas. So no matter what treaty or country you're from, including Australia or not Australia, or whatever state you want to be in, we can help. So let's chat a little bit about the E2 visa for Australians, shall we? So one of the key points, there have been a couple of changes for Australians recently. So there's a schedule we call the visa reciprocity schedule. That means it's the agreement that each country has with the United States. Those agreements dictate how long the E2 visa is good for and if there is what they call a second reciprocity fee. So in Australia, historically, the E2 visa was always good for 4 years, but the good news is it's now available for 5. That's amazing, right? So you don't need to renew for 5 years instead of 4. But here's the bad news. The visa reciprocity fee went up as well. It's approximately $5,500 per person. That's US dollars. And that packs a little bit of a punch. I will admit that one's a little bit sticky and tricky, unfortunately. However, and that is for every family member. So if you have 2 kids and you're married, that's going to be $5,500 times each person. The good news is that is not due until the day of your interview. That is paid directly to the US government after the interview if they approve you for the visa. So it's not due until the very, very end. And if for some reason you were denied the visa, you would never pay that fee. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind. But some good news, bad news there with Australians and the visa reciprocity. So we have some people coming in and coming out, which is great. I want to talk a little bit about, and if I guess with that, please type any of your questions in the chat so I can answer those. So let's talk a little bit about some of the types of businesses that we are currently seeing for Australians. And in fact, we actually had an Australian who found out about his interview today. We applied for him at the end of May, and he applied in Melbourne. So he'll be going to his interview here in a couple of weeks. So it looks like it's about 6 to 8 weeks right now to get an interview, something like that in Melbourne. That kind of gives you an update. He is doing a consulting business. So that should be really interesting, right? And yes, consulting businesses are options. We've helped many people with consulting businesses inside Australia and out. So let's see what we've got here. Can I start more than one business to qualify for my E2 visa? So maybe. It is possible to actually get 2 E2 visas. I've never done it myself because it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me, but I've seen it and it can happen. If you do 2 separate businesses and 2 separate visas for those businesses, you will need to meet the requirements for each business separately. Okay, so something to keep in mind. The more common way to do it is that you would start a business, for example, right? Like ABC LLC. That's the entity, ABC LLC. And then in your business plan, you would highlight the different things that that business does, right? So maybe it manages property and it also does construction. Oh, okay. So it's one entity that does multiple things. Because at the end of the day, if you are approved for this visa, the name of your business will be printed on your visa. And if you are an E2 visa applicant, that is the only business you can work for. Now, spouses are different, right? Spouses have a much more flexibility in what they are able to do with their work permit, which is essentially work almost anywhere they wish without separate sponsorship. But the applicant himself or herself will have the name of the business printed on the visa. That's the only business that you can work for in the United States. Okay, what is our success rate? Oh, that's great. Honestly, I don't think we've ever had any Australian denied that I can recall at all. So far, so good in Australia. And yes, we do have multiple Australian applicants. Like I said, just got one that just notified of his approval. Another one I'm doing some research for on an interesting employee issue, E2 employee issue. And yes, there are E2 visa employees in Perth. So there are 3 places also that you can apply for E2 visas. This is very unusual because even countries that do way more E2 visas than Australia usually only have 1 place where you can apply. In Australia, you can apply in 3, Perth, Sydney, or Melbourne. So whatever's closest to you, that's where we encourage you to apply. But that really helps speed things along. Although in Sydney, at least historically, they always only did interviews on Thursdays. So they are a little bit pickier in that way, but you do have 3 different options, which is pretty outstanding. Let's see. What else do we have here? If I have an American employees already with my business, can I use an E2 or an E1? Well, an E1 and an E2 are very different visas, right? I mean, they're both amazing visas and they're usually both good for entrepreneurs, but they're very different, okay? So the E2 visa, and this is the most general terms, but the E2 visa says, hey, I want to start or buy a business in the United States. I'm going to invest in that business and I'm going to hire US employees to run that business. And then I am going to go to the United States to direct and develop that business. In other words, be in charge of that business, grow the business, develop the business. That's the E2 visa. The E1 visa says, hey, I've got this company in this case, maybe Australia. And my company sells, we actually have a similar case to this. My company sells mascara, like mascara for your eyes, sells mascara to a bunch of companies in the US. We're through Nordstrom and Walmart and we do all of that stuff. All of the mascara is made in Australia, but we send it to the United States. In that case, that would be potentially an E1. The E1 says we don't maybe even need a business in the United States, but what we need is more clients for the Australian business in the United States. So I, as the owner of this Australian business, need to be able to travel to the US as frequently as I want and stay as long as I want in order to get more clients for my Australian business. In other words, to increase the trade between the 2 countries, okay? That one requires the documentation there is not about buying or selling a new business or an ongoing business in the US, but it's to say, we already have trade with the United States and we have at least 12 months of trade with the United States. So I can show you all of the invoices and the bank statements and things like that. We already have all of that. We've been doing that for at least a year. Now I want to go to the United States to increase the trade. Okay, that's the E1 visa. So those are a little bit different. So as far as employees, there are no employees required for the E1 visa. In many cases, you wouldn't even have a US business. You would have your Australian business and a lot of clients in the US, okay? Maybe no employees at all, maybe no business at all. But in the E2, yes, you will need employees for sure. Hopefully that answered. Julian, hi. What if you're looking to start a business that dealt with hemp? Okay, so cannabis, that kind of thing, that's a little bit difficult. Now the hemp thing, I don't know, that's really kind of on the edge there. I would always recommend not to do it. And here's why. The E2 visa and all immigration law, for that matter, is actually federal law, right? It's not state law. So in the United States, obviously we have 50 states, and there are different laws and regulations for each state in certain areas, criminal, for example. Okay, so California, which is where I am, we have decriminalized a lot of marijuana sales and possession, right? Not everything, but a lot of it. Federally, it is still illegal. So anything involved in marijuana will be denied. It is not a legal business to have on a federal level, only on the state level, and they don't care about that. Okay. Now, even if hemp is like, oh, well, it's not really a drug, it's not really this, I get it. But the issue is, whenever you apply for this visa, you're going to have a consular officer review this case in about 3.5 minutes or less. And if they see cannabis, hemp, whatever, they're not going to read any further. They're just like, this isn't going to work. And you getting into the details about, yeah, it's not really the drug, it's kind of for this other thing. I just think that is a little bit too dangerous when you've got that much money on the line. So I would never recommend anything that includes CBD oil or cannabis or hemp or even those words, because honestly, it's just, you've got too much on the line for a consular officer who's not reading clearly and understands the law and the difference between federal and state law. They're not lawyers, by the way. It's too much on the line. And their decision goes, right? If they deny it, then that's the end of that. Now it's denied. Now you can always reapply, but they see those buzzwords. I would be a little hesitant to tell anyone to invest in a business like that, spend that kind of money, and then put those words in there, even if it's technically legal. If the officer doesn't know that, they're just going to deny it on site. Okay. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, flying to the US. No, the interview is going to be either at Melbourne, Perth, or Sydney. So the question was, do I need to fly to the United States to do an interview or something? Absolutely not. In fact, quite the opposite. The interview would be at the US consulate in either Sydney, Perth, or Melbourne. Okay. So what we do is we work with you. We let you know all the documents we're going to need. We help you find those documents, gather those things. We will introduce you to different people here in the US that may be able to help you. So you kind of establish your business first. We get all the documentation. We put the application together, and then we send the application to one of those consulates, right? Directed by you or wherever you live. Once that happens, then the consulate will review all of the documentation, and then you'll get an interview date. You will go to the US consulate on that interview date and do your interview there. Okay. And that's who issues the visa. Let's see, what else do we have here? Can a US investor have an Australian business partner as part of or the E2 investor have an Australian business partner as part of the business? Yes, for sure. So there's a couple of different things, right? So if you want an Australian business partner who wants the E2 visa, then we need to have 50-50 ownership. Okay. So if I want to start a flower shop in Omaha, Nebraska, and my cousin also wants to own it with me, and we're both Australian citizens and we both want the E2 visa, yes, we can do that. I would own the flower shop 50% and my cousin would own the flower shop 50%. Okay. We would both have control over the business. They call that negative control. So we would each need to be present in order for the business to run, right? We each have control over the business. But that's the only way it can work with two investors. Okay. Now, there's something else you could do, right? So you say, okay, you know what? That flower shop in Omaha, Nebraska, I'm going to own that. But I have another Australian that I would like to bring on as an employee of the flower shop. And I'm buying one that already exists. We have 15 employees. I need a CFO who can run the books. We're going to be expanding. They're going to be able to hire and fire people. You know, they have a lot of executive control over the business. So in that case, that person would not come over as an E2 investor partner, but would come over as an E2 employee, an executive employee. We would just have to show this person has executive function currently, whatever they're doing, they have executive experience, and the position in the United States will in fact be executive. And those are people who could actually be E2 employees. And sometimes we do see that with minority business partners, right? In that case, maybe I own the business 80%, my cousin owns 20%, but the cousin is going to be the CFO and comes over as an E2 employee. I am the E2 investor, okay? If you're more successful, you try for an E2 based on an existing US company that you already own or purchase a new US business. I would say the possibilities are endless in that case, right? So we've had all of these scenarios, right? Start your own business from scratch, brand new business, buy an existing business from a seller somewhere, start a franchise, buy an existing franchise. In fact, I had an Australian that bought a gym here in Los Angeles. It was a franchise gym. The person, US citizen, whoever was running it, and wanted to make a career change. And so our client, who was an Australian citizen, bought that business, had to get permission through the franchisor first, bought that gym, applied for the E2 and got the E2 to run that gym. So bought an existing franchise that already exists. And then we've had people that said, hey, I set up this business a couple years ago in the US and I haven't been there, you know, COVID and everything got crazy and whatever, and I didn't want to do it. But now I'm ready to apply for that E2. So yeah, we could do that too. It really just depends on, does the business meet the requirements? Are you willing to potentially invest more? Are we able to trace the investments that you did, even though they may have been years ago? So that's really a very fact dependent and case dependent question, but the answer is almost anything will work, right? And we've had all of those types of scenarios. So it really just depends on the facts of your case. So that is that. Truck company. Oh boy. Yeah. Trucking companies. We get lots and lots of questions about those. Let me ask. If I made adjustment of status in the USA as a truck company owner with one truck, and I apply to get an E2 visa in the consulate later, if I increase my company's profit? Yeah, people do that, right? Now, as an Australian, keep in mind, if you're ticket to get into the US is ESTA, meaning I'm an Australian. I've gone to the US 7 times. I've never even gotten a visa, right? I just applied for ESTA online. I can go over for 90 days. You cannot adjust your status or change status in the case of a non-immigrant, okay? You can't do it from ESTA. But if you have a B1, B2, you can change status. You can do that. A lot of those, again, are fact dependent as well, right? So keep that in mind. But yeah, and a trucking company you can do. So some people do want to change status from like a B1 to an E2 or an F1 to an E2 or something like that. And that is possible. Again, these are all kind of fact dependent. And some people change through USCIS and then they eventually go to the US consulate in their home country to apply for the visa. Okay. We typically just recommend that you always go to the consulate and get the visa for a multitude of reasons. First of all, it's just going to save you a ton of time, right? But yeah, again, fact dependent, but you can do that. You can change status as long as you have a visa. You cannot go from ESTA to an E2. No, you cannot. But if you already have a visa and you're abiding by the terms of that visa the entire time you're in the US, and then later determine that you want to change to a different type of status, in this case, an E2, yeah, you can do that for sure. Oh, let's see. In Canada, is the consulate in Toronto only? Oh, so we have a couple of Canadian questions. Just real quick, yeah, you have to apply in Canada for a new E2 or renewal. The only thing you can do is like family members and employees of a pre-registered business can go with the other consulates. Otherwise, you must go to Toronto. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Let's see. The most common reason that someone could be rejected for an E2 visa, there's actually 2 common reasons. One is lack of substantial investment, and 2 is kind of a combination of real and operating / marginality. Okay, those are the 2 main reasons through the Department of State, meaning through the consulates or embassies, that someone is rejected. So the way that we approach these cases, right? There's 2 kind of ways to approach these cases. One way is it will likely work. Just go ahead and do it. You'll probably get the visa. And in many cases, that's correct. You'll probably get the visa. The other is let's prepare the best application we possibly can. So then if something goes awry at the consulate, we know we did everything we could and we are shocked that it was not approved, right? That is our goal. So whenever we are talking to people about putting the E2 visa application together, we always recommend you spend a minimum of $100,000 US. That's really, really important. Okay. And so, in fact, I do have an Australian that went to an interview and was approved. But they even said the only reason we're approving, I don't love this business. It was a marketing business. And for whatever reason, they didn't love it. But you have spent more than $100,000. So we'll give it a shot. We'll let you do it. Okay. That's how important that is. So that's number one, an investment that they don't deem to be substantial. So we always recommend a 6-figure investment for sure. And number 2 is kind of a combo of like a marginality / real and operating, which means we don't see how this is going to make enough money to pay you plus employees, or we don't even think this business is like really operational. Like you've got a plan, but there's nothing going on. Like it's just not there yet. So those are the things, of course, to that you really need to keep track of, right? So we always recommend that the business is operational and you have US employees, right? For a couple of reasons. First of all, to prove those requirements, but also for someone to help run your business while you do not have authorization, because you can't run your business until you have the visa. So if there are some things going on, you do need a US employee to handle those things. Then once you get the visa, you can come on over and start growing the business, okay? So hopefully that answers that. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Hmm. Let's see. Find an E2. Okay, here's a question. Can you find an E2 or an EB5 qualified business for a for a candidate? Sorry, I said Canadian for a second. No, candidate. And the answer is we don't. right? Because I'm not a business broker or a business attorney, or I don't do due diligence on businesses, things like that. So we do not do that. Usually, what we recommend for people is that you have 3 things already done before you come to us or before we can walk you through this process. Number one, you're sure that you want the E2 visa. Okay, you're the only one who can decide that. I can't make that decision for you. All right. Number two, you have 1 or 2 businesses that you're interested in to run or to apply or to start or buy in order to apply for the visa, right? So in those 2 instances, if you're totally like, I love both of these, but I'm just not sure which would be better, I can give some information that I would know about how quickly it would be to put that application together, how much money it sometimes costs to start a business like this or like this. Right. So if it's a budget that's concerned, timing is a concern, I could give you some input there as far as what we've seen with other people. Okay. And then number 3 is you should have access to your investment funds within 30 days. If you have those 3 things, I want the visa, I know 1 or 2 businesses I'm interested in buying or selling, and I know I'm going to have access to my funds within 30 days, you are a perfect person to call us or email us to schedule a consultation and talk about next steps. We will walk you through every single step after that. Those are the only 3 things you have to have done before we can really help you. Oh, tax questions. Sorry, no tax questions. We do immigration here. Tax questions are for international CPAs or tax attorneys. There are several of them. There are many of them, right? There are 330 million of us. We need lots and lots of CPAs and tax attorneys. And we're happy to refer you if needed, but for sure, we do not give tax advice on any level. I can barely handle my own. Let's see. So with that, it's 4:22. I'm going to do another 3 minutes here if anybody has any questions, because I don't want to have it drag on and on. Obviously, if you have specific questions about your case, feel free to reach out at any time, right? We can schedule a consultation or what have you. But we've got another 3 minutes here, so I'm going to find another couple questions. See if there's anybody that I haven't answered a question for. Give me a second here. Can my spouse work in the US with an E2 visa? Yeah, for sure. So when you apply for the E2 visa, you also can, if you wish, apply for your spouse and your unmarried children under the age of 21. You and your spouse will be able to renew the E2 visa as long as you still meet the visa requirements every now 5 years for the rest of your life, if you wish. Okay, the 2 of you will be able to renew. You will be able to only work in the business that is printed on the E2 visa. Your spouse will be able to work essentially anywhere he or she wants. Start their own business, work for your business, don't work at all, or apply for any job here in the United States. No separate sponsorship is needed. The kids will be able to go to school. They are never allowed to work, and they age out at 21. So even if you get them the visa when they're 19 years old, on their 21st birthday, the E2 visa is done. It is no longer, they will have to figure something else out, because it will, the day of their 21st birthday, they now have no visa. Okay. So always keep that in mind. But you and your spouse can renew every 5 years for the rest of your lives, as long as you and the business still meet the E2 visa requirements. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, spouses have really a lot of flexibility in terms of work authorization and that type of thing. Oh, E3s, we don't do those. Sorry. We only do E1s and E2s. E3s are more akin to an H1B. So you need to get prevailing wage determinations. Most people need a degree. You need a job offer. They are really not related to the E2 or E1 in any way, other than kind of they look the same because it's an E1, E2, or E3. Right. So E3s are only good for Australians, which is a good point, but they are not, they're not E2s or E1s. Sorry, I meant E2. Oh, what is the process? So the process is, there are 3 steps, and this is going to be my last question because we're almost done for the day. But like I said, reach out anytime. The information will follow here. When you come back, we're going to re-upload or save this video and upload it to our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. And then the contact information is there. Of course, you can find us online, rupertlawgroup.com, and all of our information is there. WhatsApp information, that type of thing. So let's see. What's the process? So there are 3 stages to the E2 visa process. Stage number 1 is what we call document gathering. Okay. And that's where we will give you a checklist of all the documents we need, and you will add those checklists to our Dropbox. I'm simplifying everything, but that gives you that, right? And during that time, obviously, we will help in any way. We will give you any sort of referrals or introductions that you need. You will be working on things, and we will walk you through every single step. We don't just give you a checklist and say, hey, let us know when it's there. We walk you through all of the requirements step by step by step. You have phone calls and emails with us, all of those things. You will upload all of the documents that we need. That time frame depends entirely on you. It takes the average person 3 to 4 months. We've seen people do it in about 8 weeks. I've seen people take 3 years to do it. That is entirely on you, and we will just follow your lead. As quickly or slowly as you want to move and upload those documents, that is the pace that we will move at as well. Okay. Once we have all the documents that we feel that we will need in order to apply, we will start stage number 2, which is the application assembly. That timeline is entirely on us. That's where we write the cover letter, add all of the tabs, cut the pages, put the whole application together, do all of the editing, all of that. That takes about 2 weeks. That's our timeline. And then we email to the consulate or embassy. At that point, it is out of our hands. It is out of your hands. The timeline depends entirely on the US government. You can imagine their urgency with your case. 0. But they do try to move as efficiently as possible, but that is their timeline. We have no control over it, and neither do you. At the moment, at the beginning, at the top of this show, we talked about our recent client who just got interview booked for, I think, July 11th, something like that. That was about a 6 or 7 week process from the moment we emailed the consulate until he got his interview date, about 6 or 7 weeks or so. So that gives you a sense of it in Melbourne right now. But in a week, that could change, and things are different always in Sydney and Perth. Those things are always updating. But if you move at an average pace and the consulates are working at an average pace, you can bet that it's going to be somewhere around 5 to 6 months from today would be your interview, which is the last step in the process. Okay, so that gives you kind of a little bit a taste of that. So with that, we even ran over, but thanks so much, guys. Great having you here. Please reach out anytime. We'd love to help you with your E2 visa. Thanks, guys.